Howdy, y'all. My name is Brody Huff. I'm coming to you a little more grim than I would like to have, just considering the events of not just the past couple of days, but the past few weeks and this past month. I knew that I was going to start a podcast again. I've had one in the past, but I didn't really know how to go about it. I didn't know what all I'd want to talk about. I threw around maybe just talking about history. I threw around maybe having debating conversations on just random issues, just for fun. But now more than ever, it's clear that what's most important is that the freedom of speech be used to its fullest. My voice will most likely not influence that many people, but for those that would be influenced, I just pray that I am true to the guiding light of Christ as I go about all of my thoughts and all of my actions and my mission with this podcast. And that mission is to plague those who would fear truth. Saying that I saw not too long ago, and I really believe is true. It's something that you should hold to, because in this day, now more than ever, it's important. And that saying is, if the truth should kill them, then let them die. These people don't care about the truth. They don't care about sympathy. They claim to care about empathy, but we know for a fact that that's not even possible to be empathetic. You can be sympathetic, but you can never feel what another person feels. And these people that hold to such ideologies as the far left, or even some more middle ground leftist and some so-called Republicans, anyone who is not a follower of Christ will probably not get along with me very well personally, because I am very extreme and very radical in my beliefs, because I believe that all of them are founded in the Bible. Now, obviously, I'm a man, and over time, things will change depending on how my understanding of that Bible changes, but you can believe that what I say, I mean. What I say, I believe, and I believe that what I say is founded in my faith, and nothing more than that. It can be built upon by factors that lie outside of the faith directly. Like if you are a sola scriptura person, it's through the scriptures alone, then perhaps you could find ways to argue with me, because I don't think that I don't think that everyone understands what through scripture alone means. There's areas in scripture that are gray, because it's left up to the interpretation of the believer, because that is how you test whether or not you are holding tightly to the Holy Spirit. And I try daily to hold on to Him, because I know that without Him I can make no step in the right direction. Just a little bit about me to give you some background on why I think the way that I do, and why I act the way that I do, and why I'm not really put off or offended or afraid of anyone or anything that could happen to me ever. I'm not influential enough for anything to happen to me now, so I don't have to be afraid of nothing, even if I was more, soft-skinned. I was raised by a very loving family that understood the need of the rod. They did not spare the staff. And that is not to be understood in a negative way. Like, I don't mean that they beat me all the time, obviously. My parents did not beat me. They were very loving. I am simply saying that when actions could not be tolerated, they weren't tolerated. Very few times was mercy shown if it wasn't deserved. And I thank them for that, because that taught me something that a lot of people in this generation and the generation directly before me don't understand. And that's that life isn't fair. You know, a lot of people say it and act like they believe it, but they don't. They get mad when something is unfair. But get over it. You know, like, there are 8-9 billion people on earth. You know, not everyone's going to have the same experience. You know, very, very few people are going to have the same experience. Honestly, only the extremes of society will have even similar experiences. Say the very rich are going to have their experiences that are pretty similar, and the very poor and downtrodden are going to have experiences that are very similar. But everyone in the middle has just, in their own ordinary way, they have extraordinary lives. And that's what I've had up to this point. So no, the rod wasn't spared, and I thank my parents for that, because of the lessons that it taught me. And I had to get over a weakening softness that I had growing up, where if things didn't go my way, I did have that attitude that a lot of people have these days. You know, I'd yell and I'd get mad and I'd scream and I'd flail and all that mess. You know, and I had learned enough not to do that in public, because then you get dragged outside. You know, like, they're not going to whip you in front of everybody, but you're going to get whipped, and you know it. The second you do something in public that's wrong, and you're me when you're 8 or 9 years old, you're like, well, I know it's coming. I wonder if it's going to be a wooden spoon or a leather belt. I don't know, but I'll just go ahead and prepare myself. And one thing that really taught me is that I don't do things without considering the consequences. And that's funny. If you know me, then it seems like that's one of the only things that I do, because I don't ever censor what I say. I often speak quickly and harshly. And I've been told, you know, like, soften your words a little bit. You know, don't speak so fast. Hold your tongue. Hold your horses, all of that mess. Know a little more before you talk. But I found that the only time when I ever regret my actions truly are whenever I give myself a chance to think. Because my brain outweighs my gut. Because my gut, when I say my gut, for future reference, I mean the feeling that I get that is the same as when I am in deep prayer and I'm convicted to do something or say something, or just to not give up on that prayer yet. That same feeling is the feeling that I am considering to be my gut feeling. I am aware that it is the Holy Spirit. It's just for talking in all intensive purposes, I usually say my gut feeling. When I ignore that first, because it's immediate for the most part, I regret not saying something or not doing something. I cannot look back and very often say that I regret doing something or saying something. Inaction is what I regret, because inaction from me only ever accounts to cowardice. And cowardice is not something to be tolerated these days. Not by Christian men, not by conservative men, and not by strong men. If we want to survive, if we want to push our values forward, if we want to regain what has been lost, then we have to remember that the strong survive, not the weak. When the strong are merciful, the weak can thrive. But if we elevate the weak above the strong, you get a nation like we have today that is divided, that is full of hatred, and that is separated from God. Tolerance is a sin. And I don't, I know that's kind of hefty because everybody's got different definitions of tolerance. When I say tolerance, I mean that if you can sit back and let something happen that you know is wrong, it doesn't have to be evil, but you know it's wrong, or even just not right. It's in the middle ground somewhere. It kind of irks you a little bit. You're like, it's not my problem. That is cowardice, and that is tolerance, and that cannot happen. If it continues to build this giant snowball, I'm a really old country music fan. There's an old Merle Haggard song. It says, "Are we rolling downhill like a snowball headed for hell?" And that's exactly what American society and culture look like at this moment. Now, as tragic as the loss of Charlie Kirk is, he was a very bold and outspoken man, and he will be greatly missed. His organization is named Turning Point, and with his death, as I know some of you have already seen, let us hope that this is the turning point and we're no longer going downhill. Let us jump in front of that snowball and not just roll it back uphill, but blow it out of the water. Because right now, this nation's headed for hell because we're letting anti-Christian values and anti-Christian so-called morals just bring us straight down the drain. And I, for one, just won't stand for it anymore. Something my dad said not too long ago that I don't think a more truthful statement has been uttered in the last couple months, at least not to me, is that the time has come to speak out and act out morally and righteously as we know how to act. But at the same time, because we've already been trying to do that, the time for allowing ourselves to be put down, to be insulted in our face, and spare the rod, frankly, is over. When we hold these peaceful parades or vigils like some have already held in memory of Charlie, if someone wants to make trouble, don't let them. Not anymore. The spirit of just turn the other cheek, turn the other cheek, turn the other cheek. Show mercy, show mercy, show mercy, show mercy, show mercy. Love your neighbor without the rest of that sentence. That's been going on for much too long, and people forget the other parts of the Bible because the other parts aren't as fun. The other parts aren't as pretty, and they don't sound as good. You cannot hope to continue to be a nation that sends out missionaries and pushes forward the teachings and belief system that surround Christ if you don't have a home base. And we're losing our home base. I heard not too long ago about an African man that came on a mission trip to the United States. And I know that there's been some domestic missions, within the United States, one U.S. citizen to another, going back and forth. But this man who decided to come from Africa, a continent that so many Christians in America just think of as like, oh, that's where we do our mission work because it's so backwards over there. It's like, no, well, we must have succeeded at some point, and some point along the line, we gave away our success because now they're coming here because we've let ourselves fall so far. So no, don't tolerate violence anymore. I know a lot of people will say that violence is never the answer, and to them, I would just say, I disagree wholeheartedly. I don't think that violence is never the answer. I think that oftentimes violence is not the answer. Like there's a lot of times when debate is the answer. Pick up the pen, write. Let our words be heard. But there's a reason that we have a Second Amendment too, because at times that fails, and violence is the answer. Violence has been the answer multiple times throughout history. Like that's a dumb statement. Violence is never the answer. No, that's not how it works. Violence is the answer. Violence is the answer whenever turning the other cheek fails. And the sad part is for us, and we have to know this, is that the reason that turning the other cheek failed is because we turned the other cheek and we walked away. We did not hold up our end of the bargain. We didn't set an example. We didn't try to live out what we preached. We just turned the other cheek because it's like slap. They slapped you across the face because, oh, you're a hypocrite. And then you just walk away because, yeah, you are. Many of us are guilty of that. I'm guilty of that. But now is the time to change. Take a look in the mirror. Christ didn't say, ignore the log in the other man's eye. He said to get the log out of your own eye before removing the splinter in the other man's. So you're still supposed to remove that splinter from their eye so they can see the consequences of their action. You just have to clean yourself up first. And obviously, we know that we can't clean ourselves up. That's not how it works. You have to be washed in the blood of Christ. But be washed, like actually submit yourself to that washing. Otherwise, you're not doing anyone any good. You're not doing yourself any good. You're just kind of a blob, a big worthless blob. And that's kind of why we are where we're at today. So no, violence is not always the answer, but it's definitely not never the answer. There are times when violence is not just to be tolerated, but to be justly pursued. And that's where I fear we may go wrong, is the justice of it. I saw that a very controversial figure these days, Nicholas J. Fuentes. He got on after everything had happened with Charlie, and he didn't react like a lot of people thought that he would. We thought he'd jump on the opportunity to call for violence, but that's not what he did. He canceled his show because he thought that it wasn't right to put on a show after such a tragic event. He did not call for violence. He actually said that if you're thinking of putting up arms, of bringing arms to bear, don't. Set them down. And unfortunately, I didn't get to finish that podcast, but I saw enough to say, you know what, you're right. This is not the time. This is the time to prepare for when that time comes. And my own personal belief is that time is coming soon. When a generation that has nothing to lose is pushed to the verge of their being, that's when they act out. And my generation doesn't really have anything to lose. Our lives are kind of sad as a whole. I have a very happy life, but it's not comparable in wealth and community as, say, my grandparents or my great grandparents were. They had very closely knit communities. They were able to afford to live happily and even without being wealthy, healthily. And they were able to buy things that as a lower class family, they could afford, say, land, for example. Like, even just leasing land, they could afford to lease it for their cattle and such, and then they could afford to buy it. And yes, they were responsible, and yes, we've had inflation, but that's not all. And if you've looked into it at all, like the inflation rate is not why things are expensive. The inflation rate is because people are freaking greedy. They always have been, they always will be. It's just a matter of we let that take over American culture. In the Bible, usury, interest is sin. That is a sinful action. You are not to give money in return for earning back more money. If the person you gave that money to gives you more, they give it out of the gratefulness in their heart, and you can accept it. But charging others for the money you gave them so that they could lift themselves up, that's a sin. It says, even the Gentiles, whenever he was speaking to the Jews, even the Gentiles give money to charge interest, but you should give out of the kindness of your heart. So, that kind of does not play along with American culture for the last 100 years or so. As our moral systems fall, our way of life and our happiness will fall with it. Because away from God, nothing matters. You can look at the French Revolution and compare it to the American Revolution, and the American Revolution was by a bunch of farmers that were close to God and had close-knit relationships with that God. And by that God, I mean Christ. No one else. Nothing else is God if you don't include Christ. You'll learn that I'm not a very big fan of the term Judeo-Christian, because that's not a thing. Judaism has no place alongside Christianity. It is indeed the synagogue of Satan. Judaism cannot be compared to Christianity. They do not worship God because they leave out the Son. They claim to worship the Father, and some Christians claim that they worship the Father. It's like the same God, but without Jesus. It's like, no. That's not how that works. If Jesus isn't God, then what they worship isn't God. And if it's not God, then it's anti-Christian. If it's anti-Christian, then it's Satan. There's no other option for that. And I hate hearing people try to compare the two religions and the two ways of thinking, because it's just so dumb. It's so confusing to me. Like, are you not proud of the fact that you have been given this birthright, to be born somewhere where you can freely worship Christ and truly understand what it means to be a son of God? And some people would even recoil at that. Like, what do you mean we're sons of God? It says we are brothers of Christ and we are sisters of Christ. Well, how are you going to be a brother or sister of Christ if you're not a son or daughter of God? But they recoil because it's singular. It's not saying this group of people are the sons and daughters of God. It's saying you are a son of God. Take hold of that meaning. Because you didn't work for it. You didn't do anything for that. He gave you that mantle. You have become part of that family by His mercy and by His blessing, not by your own works. And yet they'll cast away that mantle by saying that somehow or another these people are comparable to us because they worship God. And we're like, no, they don't. They worship who they claim to be God. And who they claim to be God is not God, because the only way to the Father is through the Son. If you have not known the Son, you have not known the Father. If you claim to know the Father and know not the Son, then you know not the Father. So don't come at me with this whole Judeo-Christian civilization or culture or Judeo-Christian values. No. That's not a thing. There are Christian values and there are anti-Christian values. Don't come at me with this half-hearted pass for these people. Like they're somehow different from the other religions. They're not quite us, but we see them as equals. They're our allies. No. Paul says that for the Gospels, they are our enemies. When it comes to the gospel, which is the only thing that matters, because without it, nothing else matters, they are our enemies. You can't ignore that. These people try to somehow put up the... And now when I'm talking about these people, I'm speaking of Protestant Christians more so than anybody else, which I am a Protestant. I'm just simply stating that for the most part, Catholics don't hold Jews somehow being an ally because of their faith or their race. A race doesn't matter. I don't know if y'all forgot that or what, but race doesn't lift you higher or lower than anyone else. But outside of Christianity, your religion doesn't matter. Like, I don't know what to tell you, bro, but if you aren't following Christ, then your views don't matter, Like, I hope that you say your views. Because if you debate people like me who believe how we believe, when we do it through the heart of Christ, we win. Like truthfully, when on a level playing field, the pen is stronger than the sword. We're going to see that play out. Because Charlie lived by the pen, and the man that killed him lived by the sword. And now, if that man gets exactly what so many people are asking for and exactly what the governor of Utah has called for, then he will die by the sword. Charlie didn't deserve to die by the sword, but his legacy will live on through the pen. Many more will rise up in his place. And I think with his death, we're going to see a revival in the United States, in both the religious and political world. Don't believe that I am being harsh for harshness' sake. I just have gotten so tired and so fatigued when it comes to trying to, see eye to eye with people who just think of you as an animal. You try to show respect, you try to give them the basic human respect that you've been taught to give people, and they just treat you like a dog. And I'm done with it. On a new basis with someone I've never met, they're going to continue to get treatment as I've been taught. But if you want to disrespect me, okay, I'm not giving you respect. That doesn't mean I'm going to go out of my way to disrespect you. My parents have taught me better than that. But it does mean that if you lay a hand on me, I'm going to beat you. Like, you're going to the ground. And after that, I don't know. I'll see the consequences of those actions, but I've come to terms with it already. You know, I'm not dealing with this anymore. I'm not gonna sit aside and just let myself be treated like so many people are being treated right now by one side. We saw candlelight vigils for Charlie Kirk. We didn't see cities burning down and people getting car bombed because of what they believed. It was just, man, we lost a good man today, a hero, and now a martyr. You know, one of the few things that he talked about at every single tour or speaking event that he did was the truth of Jesus Christ. And that is more truth than anything else that he sought to bring to the light. He sought truth in every way. But without that truth, as I've already said about the Gospels, nothing else matters. So if you're pushing that truth every time and you get killed, then you didn't just get assassinated or executed. You got martyred. Charlie lived for Christ, and because of that, he died for gain. You know, he's the only person that you shouldn't be sad for right now, because he is just living it up. Pray for his family. Be sad for his family. Pray for those that he led, that they might keep level heads and remember his example. And pray for those who hated him, because they don't recognize the consequences of their actions yet, because we have set aside and not shown them the consequences of their actions for too long. But it's time to let let the consequences of their actions fall on their own heads, is basically what I'm trying to get across. You know, growing up, I can remember watching this show with my grandma. You know, I call her Nana. It's just kind of what I don't know why. I don't know if one of my cousins said it first before I was born, or if I just couldn't say a name, so I called her Nana. I don't know the origin of why we call her Nana, but we call her Nana. I love Nana. And I grew up watching this show called The Rifleman, and it was about this young single father and his son who moved to Texas after the Civil War, and his wife had died. And they bought this ranch, and it's just basically him trying to raise up his son the best he can while building up those around him and fighting back evil that comes to him. He always carried a rifle, you know. He was good with it. That's something you can't forget. Be trained with the weapons that you're going to use. If you know that you're not going to use physical weapons, then there's not really a reason to train with those. If you have the wherewithal, if you have the strength, because it does take true strength to only use your words, then by all means train yourself up with those words. But if you know that you could potentially use weapons of war of this world, then train with those too, so that you're good with them. Anyways, this character's name was Lucas McCain, and he was good with this rifle. And his son, you know, he was always back and forth like a kid is. Like, he'd go one way, and he thinks it's so cool to do one thing or another because his friends are doing that too. Like, there's an episode I think this show was in the 1950s. It's not like a new age thing. Give me just a second. I got my phone right here. I'm just going to pull up how old it is. Yeah, 1958 was the first season. And already, with this taking place in Texas and seemingly portraying 1870s, 1880s, there was an episode that kind of covered, say racism. You know, can't talk. Mark McCain was the son. Lucas and Mark went to town, and these people from Argentina showed up. They just bought a ranch. They'd been looking and running for a long time because the son of that family kept making mistakes. And these other kids in the street, they called this son, this character that was from Argentina, they called him a pepper gut. And that is a derogatory term, if you can't tell. And Mark just fell right in with it. Like, yeah, because he thought it was funny. Everybody was laughing. And Lucas, the father, was like, hey, whoa, wait a minute, no. Because Mark didn't recognize the consequences of his actions, but Lucas did. And Lucas wanted what was best for his son, so he said, don't do that. He didn't just go, yeah, keep letting you do what you're doing because tolerance. No. But respect is not always given back to you. Lucas respected this family, even though he didn't know much about them. He didn't judge them based off of what kind of people they were, who they were, any of that stuff. And he told Mark not to as well. But that doesn't mean that you're always right. And later on in the show, this guy from Argentina actually tried to kill Lucas after killing another man. And Lucas didn't sit by and let it happen. He had shown this man respect. He had tried to help him. He had tried to even garner a relationship, a friendship between his son and this boy. And he had to shoot him. Because the consequences of that kid's action fell upon his own head. Lucas has other things to think about. His son, his ranch, the people that depend on him in the community. He's not going to just sit by and get killed. No. When tolerance is met with intolerance, you don't continue being tolerant. You act. And you act in a way that does not spare the rod, as I've already said. So anyways, I really like that show. I think it portrays a way of life that has been lost throughout the years, a way of life that would be beneficial to get back to, and gives an example to men like me to train with both the pen and the sword. The pen is preferable, but that doesn't mean that the sword is not strong. Hey, you'll hear from me in the future. I've decided that I can't, like I said, I can't just stand by and let things continue to happen. I'll make my voice heard. I don't know what all that'll mean, but it'll mean something. And if nothing else, it'll mean something to me knowing that I didn't just sit back and tolerate the intolerable. It took me a while to come up with a name for this podcast, and I kind of got it narrowed down to two of them. And I didn't really know what would embody who I am and the message that I'll try to spread to the best of my ability. So I just finally decided that since I couldn't decide, I'd talk first, and I'd give myself time to think and time to feel what was right as this podcast went on. And the two options were between Sword of the South and Southern Steel. Because something that I do hold to, like the Southern was going to make it in, because I am a son of the South as far as I'm concerned. The lessons that were taught to me growing up are the lessons that make a Southern gentleman, and I don't always hold to those. Oftentimes I act like a dumb young kid. But that's not who I've been raised to be, and that's not who I seek to be. But Sword of the South puts off the wrong message. It puts off that violence is always the answer. It puts off that the negative portions of Southern culture are what I try to push. That's not true. So I'm going to go with the second option, and the second option is Southern Steel. This will be called the Southern Steel Podcast, Because steel makes two things. It makes high-quality pins, and it makes high-quality swords. Because both hold equal weight in today's society. And a good man, a man that will truly make a difference, is a man that carries both the pen and the sword. And the last thing that steel would have made are the nails that were used on that cross when they crucified our Lord. And why I add that into this explanation is because whether or not you're good with the sword, whether or not you're good with the pen, whether you carry one, the other, or both, if you don't remember those nails, if you don't remember the cross, if you don't pick up your cross and follow Christ daily, then nothing else will matter. The time of separating your faith from your everyday life has come to an end. Become extreme in your views and strong in your stances. But don't ever forget that you were a sinner first. My name is Brody Huff, and this is the Southern Steel Podcast. Y'all have a good evening.